Hi, everyone. Welcome to our April monthly meeting. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to give a couple quick NAMI Northern Virginia announcements. April is almost over, which means it is about to be May. And many of you know that that means that Mental Health Month is coming up. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a great month to talk about mental health, to share what we know, to find resources, share information. We have a lot of great events coming up. A couple of things that I want to share on Monday, May 3rd, so very beginning of Mental Health Awareness Month, we are holding a public Ending the Silence presentation for families. So this is a presentation designed for people who support youth, so a parent or other caregiver of children under 18 to learn warning signs about mental health conditions in teens and how to get help if you know a child who's struggling. It's a great presentation. It'll be about an hour and 15 minutes long. We have two awesome virtual presenters. We're going to share that, so please check out our website to find more information about that. We also have a public In Our Own Voice presentation coming up on Wednesday, May 12th at 6:30 p.m. So In Our Own Voice is another presentation program designed to share information on warning signs and resources for mental health. And you get to hear lived experience from two adults who live with mental health conditions. It's a great program. Again, we have awesome presenters, so I'd love for you to check that out. All the information about our upcoming events can be found on our website, on our calendar. You can check it out to find what's coming up in May. And we'll also be sharing information both in our email and on our social media. So keep an eye out for what's coming. We'll also be sharing lots of resources, information, and also just a sneak peek, we're going to be sharing information about NAMI Walks Northern Virginia, which is happening on October 9th this year. We will be kicking off walk season very shortly, so keep an eye out for that. With that, I am going to pass it over to our awesome presenters. I'm really excited to have Kristen and Christy here from Rock Recovery to share information about eating disorders. I'm going to pass it over to them.
Thanks, Megan. So we are so excited to be here with you guys tonight. And to introduce myself quickly, I'm Christy Dondera-Betway. I am the Executive Director for Rock Recovery. And here with me, I have Kristen Soto, who you'll be hearing from later on in the presentation. She's our Director of Outreach and like 17 other things. I feel like we shortened her job description because it was just too complicated. So here we are. And technically we have her slide here. She's actually the Director of Community Partnerships. So even I can't get the title right, Kristen, sorry, it's a long one. It's a good one. But we're here tonight just to talk a little bit about eating disorders specifically. It's an issue that impacts so many of us in the community, and it's something that we really are passionate about educating and equipping people to understand how to get help for themselves or for their loved ones. And so just a little bit about Rock Recovery. We're a nonprofit based in Arlington, Virginia, and we bridge gaps in the treatment and understanding of eating disorders and mental health concerns. So we specifically provide clinical treatment programs like group therapy and group meals for people who are struggling with eating disorders or body image issues. And then we also offer educational events, support groups, and all kinds of different things. Everything right now is still virtual due to COVID, and we will do virtual things forever, just like this. We're realizing how great it is to be able to reach people and connect across state lines and across different areas. But we also look forward to offering programs and services again at our offices in Arlington, Virginia, when we are able, which we're hoping to do later on this fall. But our unique approach really is to help decrease stigma around mental health conditions, especially eating disorders, and to help increase access to care. And one of the big barriers we've seen a lot at Rock Recovery is just cost and accessibility are two big barriers that keep people from getting the help that they need. So we offer all sliding scale services and really great and unique programs as well. And I always like to just close this too at the beginning of presentations where I too actually have lived experience with an eating disorder. I've been recovered for over a decade. And so I love getting to share my story and hope for people as well. All right, so today we've got quite a lot of good things to cover. We'll go over a lovely parent story from one of our partners named Daniel, and then I'll go over a little bit of information about what are eating disorders, what are warning signs, what do they look like, and then Kristen will pick up for us talking about what is the role as a loved one, how do you support someone that you love, whether they're an adolescent or an adult, and also kind of piggyback and carry on and tell a little bit more about Daniel's story as well. And then we'll of course close with resources for support. We always want to make sure that everyone has connections and next steps at the end of all of our presentations. And you're always welcome to contact us as well, which will share that information at the end of the presentation. All right, so here's a quote from Daniel, one of the parents that we've worked with before. And he says, in October 2016, I was woken up by a call that every parent dreads. News from my middle daughter that her younger sister was in the middle of a deep personal crisis that had been exhausting for years. Tara was struggling with bulimia. And so we were connected with Daniel, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. And he said, you know, he got this phone call and he had no idea what to do. He had no idea who to turn to for support and didn't really know how to intervene well. So he did what most of us do. He turned to the internet and to Google, and he happened to find a couple different resources, and he got connected with us along the way. But this is such a common story that so many of us have experienced, where we get this news, we're kind of shocked, we don't know what to do. And so we turn to the internet or we turn to other people in our lives to help support us. And the good news that we always like to share is that, you know, with proper treatment and support and care, we really believe that complete freedom from eating disorders and disordered eating is possible. And so whether we're connecting the client themselves to care or whether at Rock Recovery we're connecting family, friends, loved ones, we really believe that it takes a village and that true and real freedom in recovery is possible. But it takes education, it takes support, and it takes having some hard conversations sometimes and knowing what to do. So that's what we'll be covering today. So what are eating disorders? You'll actually hear me flip back and forth between the verbiage eating disorder and disordered eating. I'm not trying to be tricky, I'm not trying to confuse you, but we use the term disordered eating a lot because it really captures a wide variety of different types of disordered eating behavior. And one thing that we see a lot at Rock Recovery is that, you know, people are struggling with food and body image, but they think, oh, I'm not that sick. Oh, my weight isn't that bad, or oh, this person's worse than me, so surely I don't have a problem. And really, you know, if anything is disordered with food or body image, we think that there's more room for healing and freedom. And so it's something that's really worth working on. So we talk about disordered eating often as sort of a scale and a range where there's, you know, healthy acceptance of body shape and size and food and good, natural, balanced eating patterns, all the way down to chronic dieting, all the way over to true anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder, which we'll talk about now, some of the actual definitions of true eating disorders. So about 28 million Americans will battle an eating disorder in their lifetime. You know, these surveys, I always feel like that number is actually a little bit low. The real data that I have is whenever I used to travel for work and was sit on a plane and someone asked what I did for a living, and I told them, you know, I can't tell you a time I didn't have someone say, oh my gosh, me too, or my brother, or my partner, or my parent. You know, so many people have been affected by eating disorders, but because of stigma, we still don't often talk about it as highly as we should, or as we could perhaps. So, but this estimated number of people in America are at least 28 million Americans. So that's about 1 in 10 people who will struggle with an eating disorder, a clinically significant eating disorder at some point in their lifetime. And again, that disordered eating scale and range, millions more will struggle with different disordered patterns that aren't actually clinically significant or diagnosed as an eating disorder. And then, of course, about 1 in 5 Americans experience other mental health challenges, including anxiety and depression. And this number also varies, but less than 70%, we've heard various numbers going upwards of 90%, but this is the new statistic we're working with, but less than 70% of people get the help they need due to either stigma, isolation, or cost of care and treatment. So at Rock Recovery, and I know here at NAMI, we're really working to change this and getting people connected to the care that they need. So the 5 most common eating disorders, which we'll cover here tonight, are anorexia, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, bulimia, binge eating disorder, which is actually the most common eating disorder, but one of the newer ones in the Diagnostic Statistic Manual for Mental Health Disorders. So the DSM only recently included this. Then there's avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, also called ARFID, and other specified feeding and eating disorders called OSFED. So lots of letters, lots of acronyms, but we will go ahead and jump into these definitions. So anorexia might be something that you're familiar with, that you've maybe heard about or seen on TV or had some friends and family who who suffer from anorexia. This is an eating disorder that's really characterized by often loss of weight and restriction around food. So it's often excessive restriction, and oftentimes along with anorexia, there is distorted body image. So people don't often see what they actually look like. Some people can have anorexia without any weight or shape concerns, but generally speaking, there is some weight and shape concern and an excessive restriction of food and therefore of weight. It's also important to note, I want to say this here, for any eating disorder, people can be in any size body, any shape, or any weight. We cannot discriminate based on, oh, this is only something that if you're really thin, or that only happens to people in affluent families or young women, right? People of all genders, all backgrounds, all different makeups struggle with eating disorders. And that really does also include weight. So people can have anorexia and be in a higher weight body or maybe a larger body. And so it often goes underdiagnosed and unaddressed for people, especially for people living in larger bodies. That's a huge concern we have here. But there is, of course, the typical cases of anorexia too that does include weight loss and restriction. So this includes the inability to consume adequate nutrition that someone needs to really sustain their healthy weight based on their set point, the genetically kind of pre-programmed weight that their body was determined to have. For adolescents, this can really change some of the growth charts and the trajectories that people experience. And there's often an intense fear of food and weight gain for people with anorexia, and often, like I mentioned, a disturbance in body perception as well. So bulimia nervosa, some of you might be familiar with this, it's characterized by often distorted body image and a cycle of binging and compensatory behaviors. So there's often sort of a loss of control, pattern evading, where someone really consumes a vast quantity of food, often in a short period of time, and then they do some kind of compensatory behavior. So we often think about vomiting. That's really the most well-known part of bulimia that we often think about, but a compensatory behavior can also include taking laxatives or diet pills, or also over-exercising. So this is a really easy one that we often miss because our world can be a little bit disordered around exercise and different things with body image. And so we're often sort of told, oh, it's great to exercise all the time, or, oh, you ran how many miles, how great. But really, this actually, when someone is excessively exercising and not listening to their bodies, that can be a sign of bulimia as well. And then oftentimes people actually engage in these behaviors because of weight and shape concerns and just sort of feeling out of control around the binge and wanting to kind of compensate for the behaviors. So binge eating disorder, again, the most common eating disorder and also one of the most misunderstood. So more people will have binge eating disorder than anorexia and bulimia combined. Even though, we hear a lot more about anorexia and bulimia, binge eating disorder is really underdiagnosed and something that's really easy to miss. So this is an eating disorder that's characterized by recurrent binge eating. So again, loss of control eating, perhaps eating large quantities of food in a short period of time without any of those compensatory measures like vomiting, laxatives, or exercise. And these eating episodes also are accompanied by marked distress, and people sense a lack of control during these episodes. And one thing I'll mention as well, we won't get into this too much tonight because, we can't cover it all in one presentation, but we do see this a lot with our clients at Rock Recovery and a lot with people with binge eating disorder. Restriction often causes binging for people. So a lot of times our clients that come to us with binge eating disorder are actually often on diets. They're trying to lower their caloric intake during the day. They're trying to really restrict their food. And that behavior alone can be what cycles this recurrent pattern of restricting and binging, because our bodies and our brains are smart and they try to take care of us. And so when we're not eating enough calories and getting enough nutrition, our bodies kind of signal, hey, we need more. And so that's often when this loss of control patterns can start. So often restriction really comes before these patterns of binge eating, but people, because there's a lot of fat phobia in our culture and a lot of desire for people to be in smaller bodies, this is often missed even in medical professions. It's missed in all kinds of different places in our society because of the idealized kind of thin body. But oftentimes people who have binge eating disorder in particular, and bulimia as well, I can really have it happening because of restrictive episodes. and because they're trying to diet and lose weight. All right, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID. So this is an interesting, a little bit different than anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating disorder. It is really characterized by an inability to meet appropriate nutritional needs. This is often something that people, there's not really a weight or shape concern happening, but maybe someone choked in the past, so they have a fear of certain foods, or they don't like the texture. There might be some sensory behavior things going on where they'll only drink milkshakes or drink kind of things that are smooth, or they only like certain types or textures. And this can be really tough as well. So it's often called picky eating or misdiagnosed as picky eating. And of course, kids can be picky eaters. I've got nieces and nephews, you know, chicken fingers and French fries for days in that household. But there's a difference between just picky eating and true ARFID, where someone is restricting a food where there is a different kind of sensory concern or a different fear around the food. And it can be associated with weight loss because of the variety of food is often really limited for someone with ARFID. And this too, for adolescents in particular, can hurt the growth trajectory and not have enough nutritional patterns coming for someone who really needs to have more nutrition coming into their bodies. And then other specified feeding and eating disorders, so OSFED. This used to be called, oh my gosh, what does it used to be called? I'm blanking, it'll come to me in a minute, sorry, very long day. But OSFED is the new diagnosis from the DSM that I mentioned. And this is basically captures feeding disorders that are of clinical severity, but they're not actually, they don't meet diagnostic criteria. So this is something like atypical anorexia, purging disorder, which is maybe someone who actually engages in bulimia-like behaviors without a loss of control or binge eating episode prior to, or really anything on that disordered scale that we mentioned earlier can really also kind of fall into this OSFED category. And this can also include night eating syndrome, which is excessive nighttime food consumption. Again, that can also sometimes be predicated by periods of restriction as well. But these are all kinds of different things that aren't quite fitting the other criteria for the other previously mentioned eating disorders, but it does have some clinical severity. And this is just another way to kind of capture some things that don't check all of the boxes and fit some of the other criteria. So what are some warning signs to look for? Of course, we know eating disorders and body image concerns have emotional effects, behavioral and physical effects. So it's possible that you'll notice changes in your loved one's behaviors that show that they're struggling in different areas. So people might be isolating, they might be more irritable, they might change who they hang out with or what their patterns are like, or they might actually withdraw from activities. There is, of course, a lot of co-occurring disorders and comorbidities with people with eating disorders, including with depression and anxiety. So there's often various factors kind of going on all at once, but these are some changes you'll start to see. And of course, there's physical things that you might see, which we can talk about momentarily, and just other kinds of concerns. So there's a wide variety of things you can look for that include social, behavioral, mental, physical, spiritual, really all the different ways that we show up as humans. That this can kind of give us an insight and a window into what's going on for someone with an eating disorder. So some signs and symptoms here are preoccupation with weight, food, calories, carbs, fat grams, dieting. So, you know, nothing new under the sun, but there are all kinds of different fad diets that often circulate through in our society. So it might be avoiding carbs, it might be a high fat, it might be avoiding this certain food or counting this sort of thing, or keto or Whole30 or whatever the thing might be. So there's often different diets and fad things that happen in society. And so those things can often kind of trigger eating disorders or be something that people use to mask their eating disorder. Oh, I just eat this way because I'm vegan. There are wonderful, great reasons to be vegan for lots of people, but oftentimes it's something that people can really hide behind as sort of a reason to be able to say no to food. And you'll notice with people often they have a preoccupation with weight, food, calories, carbs, fat grams, and dieting. And they sort of feel like, I have to eat this many calories, I can't go over this thing. There's a lot of preoccupation with those numbers in particular. They might want to eat in isolation or not eat around other people and really withdraw from social settings. Sometimes, like I mentioned, the food diets, there's a lot of extremism with people with eating disorders that often they follow these rigid rules to feel safe and to feel in control. And we don't have time to get into this too much, but we do know that eating disorders are biopsychosocial illnesses. And so we know there's biological factors, genetic factors, social factors, environmental factors. There's a lot of complex reasons why someone might develop an eating disorder, including trauma, change, triggers, all kinds of different things can really kind of contribute to developing an eating disorder. But dieting is one of the huge things that often contribute to people developing eating disorders. We've heard so many stories from clients saying, I only wanted to lose a little bit of weight. I only meant to do this, and suddenly I feel out of control and I can't make myself eat, or I can't stop doing this. And it can really be out of control for some people. So I mentioned withdrawal from family and friends and activities, being concerned about body shape and size, looking in the mirror a lot, talking about size or weight, having mood swings, up and down behavior, fluctuations in weight. Sometimes bodies change, and that can be super normal and totally fine and healthy. But if someone's really yo-yo dieting or experiencing pretty extremes, ups and downs over time, that can be a sign something's going on. And of course, menstrual irregularities, so either missing a period or different things happening with the cycle. This can be masked occasionally by hormonal birth controls, but there's often some different things that you can see in people's cycles as well, especially for women, of course. That's another thing to look for. Other physical symptoms: fainting, dizziness, sleep issues, erosion of teeth, especially for people with bulimia, dry skin and hair or brittle nails, swelling of the throat in particular, and saliva glands from either binging, purging, or other different behaviors. Fine hair growing on the body, especially for people with anorexia. If they go below their natural body weight, you can really have problems with that fine hair that grows to keep them warm. Muscle weakness, cold hands, poor healing, impaired immune functioning, and then just constant injuries is another one to add here. I feel like I have had a lot of friends who I know have struggled with eating disorders who seem to always be hurt or sick. So there is just sort of that general piece. All right, so Kristen, I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. And I think jumping back in, Christy did a great job reviewing, what are eating disorders, what other signs to look for, because that's the first part, is being able to recognize what you're seeing and identify it. So thank you for that understanding. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think EDNOS is what OSFED used to.
Oh my gosh, it was literally my diagnosis. I'm like, why am I so tired? Yes, EDNOS, thank you. All the acronyms. You'd think in Washington, D.C. we'd have them down by now. But yes, thank you, Kristen. That was going to drive me, that was going to really bother me.
So I figured I'd jump in and help out there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So now that you have started to understand, like Christy said, those are just the 5 common types of eating disorders. Often, Christy talked a little bit about, just understanding some of the stereotypes around body and size. But one of the other misconceptions that I think I often heard before coming into this role and learning more about this is that people would struggle with just one type of eating disorder, and that's just not true. We see clients all the time who have a variety of symptoms that can fall into any of the categories that we went over. So once you understand a little bit more about eating disorders, now it's time to look at, so what is my role as a loved one? How can I offer support? Where are those boundaries set? And so those are some of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit today. So there are a couple things that you can do to support your loved one. And before I dive into this, I just want you to understand that everybody's process looks different. It's so, this process is so clearly able to identify with your family. We all come from different backgrounds. There are cultural factors that come into play. There are family factors that you've set up. There's a process. And so these are just a couple of the things that you can do to support your loved one, but just understand that everyone's journey is going to look really different. So some of the things we'll talk about today is talking to your loved one, getting them connected to care, educating yourself on the issue, doing things like this, being a part of these conversations, and just understanding a little bit more what your loved one's going through. Finding support for yourself, that's so important, and just a step that you cannot skip in this process. And then continuing to check in, developing a pattern. What does that look like to make sure that your loved one is staying on top of their recovery? So first, talking to your loved one. How do you have this conversation? It's not an easy conversation to have. We've talked to so many parents and siblings and spouses, and everyone comes in with a different story. But I think the one thing that we've heard from everyone is it's just hard. It's hard to know what to say, and you want to say the right thing. And so, I wish I could give you the magic equation to say the exact right thing every time, but I can't. But what we can do is give you a couple steps that you can take to just making your loved one feel safe. And so the first part is just being present, showing up for the conversation, being there wholeheartedly, and not letting fear drive the conversation. Recognizing, like I said, that this is a hard conversation to have, but understanding that this is a really hard conversation to hear, especially for that person who's struggling and for that person who's in it. So not letting fear drive the conversation. Setting up a time to talk to your loved one when they're not going to feel attacked, which could be hard to do, but finding a time where you're able to create that, like I said, that space of safety. So when they're coming in the door from a 14-hour day of work, it's probably not the best time to have that conversation. But really just creating that space where they can feel safe and they can feel loved and supported through the conversation. The second part is listening. It's important in this conversation to voice the things that you've seen that raise concerns, but also just creating that space to listen to your loved one, to listen to what they're feeling, because this is an opportunity for them to share with you. It's an opportunity for them to kind of unburden the things that they've been carrying and talk to someone that they feel safe around. So giving your loved one the space to respond, listening to what they have to say, and listening to what support they voice to you that they might need in this time. And then taking a person first approach. So just having your loved one understand that everything that you are saying to them is coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of concern and a place of wanting them to get connected to the help that they need. So making sure that they understand that, again, it's not an attack, but it is a conversation that's necessary to just make sure that they're getting the care that they need so that they can be healthy, so that they can thrive and just live their life in the best way that they can. So then the next step after you've had the conversation is getting them connected to care. And again, this will look so different depending on what your loved one's struggling with, what age they are, whether they live with you or not. And so we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later. But the first thing to start with is just doing your research. It is amazing what Google can do and what we can use it for. And so, when you Google, it's easy to get overwhelmed. There's a lot of treatment options available. So just start with understanding what your loved one needs and kind of go from there. Don't be afraid to do a little digging. Don't be afraid to poke around, to ask questions. You are absolutely allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to be the advocate for your family member. So the goal is to find what works for you and for your family. So it's okay to check out your options. It's okay to get in touch with a couple different people to get the care that you need. The second part is understanding building a treatment team. So earlier on, Christy had mentioned it takes a village. And with mental health, with any kind of care, it truly takes a village. So, we at Rock Recovery, we offer therapy support, but we are constantly talking to treatment centers and to dietitians, to other experts in the field who can even help us get people placed with the right support that they need for them. Because just because a person works with eating disorders, it doesn't mean that they're the therapist or that they're the provider for you. So your loved one throughout this process will need to build a team for themselves, and that means connecting with more than one provider. Your treatment team can include a therapist, a dietitian, a primary care provider. If you have a doctor who is maybe not working for you or not meeting the needs that you need, that's okay. It's okay for you to find someone else who's going to meet those needs. So just understanding the support that you need and then building that treatment team around you and around getting you the care that you need. And that includes bringing in support groups and things that are not necessarily clinical, but still really vital to getting that care. And then the next thing is just using your resources. This is not something that you have to do alone. Understanding that there are people out there who can help answer the questions you have, who can help get you connected to care. There are a lot of treatment centers that offer assessment teams who can help tell you where to start, because you're not an expert in this, and that's okay. So reaching out to people who will help you build out the team and just using those resources. Again, the Google. It's a key factor in this process. The next step is educating yourself on the issue. So there are lots of different ways that you can do this. And it's a combination of learning from people who have had lived experience and then learning from experts in the field. Those are both equally important spaces to connect to. So the first piece is finding a community. There are so many families who have been through this. There are Facebook groups full of people who want to offer support around this issue. There are trainings like this available. There are blogs and podcasts and things like that. So finding that community that can offer the support you need and answer the questions. And there are communities of clinicians that you can talk to, like I said, or there are communities of people who have the lived experience, people who have gone through the eating disorder themselves, or people who are loved ones who have supported someone through this. So finding the people that you need to get you through this process. The second is searching for online resources. So like I said, there are articles, there are blogs, there are podcasts, there are YouTube videos. There are so many tools that have been designed to help people navigate this journey, because the reality is everybody's learning as they go through it. And so there are so many resources out there, and we're going to share some of them with you at the end so that you can get connected to people who are willing to share the information and the knowledge and the experience that they have, so that another family doesn't have to go through what they did in the same way. So again, just understanding that these resources are designed to help you and your loved one address the unique needs that you have, and then learning from experts. Like we have great organizations like NAMI that leads talks like this, and that can that are providing resources so that you can get connected to people in the field to help you through the process. The next part is finding support for you. And I feel like throughout this process, this can be the easiest part to ignore, because it's so easy to have all your focus on your loved one, to say, you know, they're the ones that need the support. They're the ones that need to get connected to care. But understanding that you need support throughout this process too, and it's okay. So don't be afraid to seek professional help for yourself. You are allowed to find a counselor to help you navigate helping your loved one navigate their journey. It's important to seek the care that you need throughout this process. And it's kind of the idea of like when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put on your oxygen mask first. And it feels like, okay, but I want to help my child, or I want to make sure that my loved one next to me is cared for. But if you're passed out, you can't care for them. So remembering that in order to best care for your loved one, you have to care for yourself as well. Taking time to rest and reflect is so important. So understanding that nobody's journey is linear. There are going to be good days and there are going to be bad days. You are allowed to celebrate the victories of that process, and you're allowed to grieve the hard days. And so it's finding the tools and the rhythms that worked with you to take time to rest and then to take time to reflect on the process. So we love journaling at Rock Recovery. That's just one tool that I can give you to help you reflect. Another great thing is just taking time to get outside, going for a walk, sitting in a space that feels safe for you. Doing any of these things can help create that space of reflection time. But it's just important that you block off that time to just wind down and think through the process. And then engaging in spiritual care. So making sure that you're grounding yourself regardless of what your faith background is, finding that time to engage in that spiritual care. So whether that's time for prayer, whether it's taking time for meditation, time to do yoga, but really making sure that you understand that like Christy said, this process affects every part of you, and it integrates every part of your journey into it. And that includes the spiritual piece as well. So making sure you're caring for that part as well, and continuing to engage in your daily practices. And then the last thing is checking in. So understanding that now that you've got this process started, it's important that you're staying connected to your team, that you're staying connected as a family, and that you're staying connected to your loved one. So what does it look like to stay connected to the treatment team? This is going to, again, look different if your child and loved one or loved one is under 18. You're going to really be an integral part of that process. So your job is to be an advocate for your child in that. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to have confidence in your ability to advocate for your child's recovery, and make sure that you just understand what's going on. Again, just don't be afraid to ask questions so that you know that you understand the process. Staying connected as a family, I think it's important to understand that this journey is going to affect your entire family, but that doesn't mean that you stop being a family. It doesn't mean that you stop engaging in your daily family practices with one another. It's important that you remain connected. It's important to do the things that you enjoy as a family. And it's important to just really stand firm in being grounded with one another, because it will test you, it will pull you, it will stretch you, it will be hard. But just knowing that you are connected as a unit to one another is a really crucial part of navigating the recovery process. And then finally, just staying connected to your loved one. Like I said, finding that rhythm of check-ins, whatever works for you, making sure that they feel loved and supported, making sure that they know that they have not just a treatment team behind them, but a family team behind them is just key to this process. And finding that boundary and that balance where they don't feel overwhelmed, but feel supported. And there can be a fine line between that. So again, just making sure that you're checking in, but without crossing that boundary. Safety is a really key part of this, making sure that they feel safe. So like I said, a couple things look different if you're an adolescent, if your child or loved one is an adolescent versus if they're an adult. So we'll talk through some of those things now. If your child or loved one is an adolescent, a few key things to remember: you are a core part of that treatment process. So like I said, it's going to, the family is crucial to engaging with that recovery process. Therapists are going to be informing you about what's going on with your child. Your child's dietitian is going to be informing you. So you have to remain a part of that process in supporting them throughout it. Your role, again, is to be an advocate for your child. So again, I can't reiterate it enough. Don't be afraid to ask questions to make sure that you understand the process. Again, finding support for yourself is crucial. Don't be afraid to ask your people for help. Don't be afraid to seek counseling support. Just maintaining and remembering that it takes a village, and not being afraid to use your village. I know that oftentimes with mental health, things can feel like a burden, but knowing that you're not a burden, that people love you, that they want to support you, and not being afraid to ask for that help. And then remembering that recovery is linear. Take it one day at a time. And it's okay to take it one day at a time, because sometimes you're going to need to take it 1 minute or 1 hour at a time. Everybody's process and journey looks different, and that's okay. And then if your child or loved one is an adult, it's important that you remember boundaries. They are the driver of their recovery. So you're not, as a parent with an adult child, I'm sure this could be really hard to allow your child to be the driver of their recovery, to allow them, to trust them to be the driver of their recovery. It's probably difficult, but understanding that there are boundaries that have to be set for your child to, or loved one, to be able to thrive, for them to be able to recover and to begin to live their lives again. So just understanding and even asking them, what are those boundaries? What can I do to support you? What can I not do that will be supportive to you as well? So making sure that you have those conversations and understand that. Again, understanding healing takes time and recovery isn't linear. Everyone's journey looks different. I know we keep repeating these things, but it's so, we have this saying that, and I can't remember who said it because I'm sure we were not the first people to say it, but comparison is so often the thief of joy. And that is both important for people to remember when they're struggling with an eating disorder and when they're supporting someone with an eating disorder. You will have days where you ask those questions like, why my child, why my loved one, why does their journey look different from this person's journey? But just remembering that recovery is full of ups and downs, and that your job is to support your loved one as they navigate it, not to be the driver of it. And then just remembering that the best thing you can do is offer love and support, make them feel safe, make them feel supported, make them feel loved throughout the process, and just be there for them. And so going back to Daniel's story, so how did things end? Here is another quote from him. So Daniel got connected to Rock Recovery because he was looking for resources in the greater Washington area, as Christy said, that could just help him understand what his daughter Tara was going through. Rock Recovery really helped me gain the strength to keep going. In late 2018, Tara moved to Colorado, where she's sober, eating properly, and enjoying her job. And it's just, we love to hear stories like these. We are sharing just snippets of this story. So we're sharing the very beginning of the struggle, and then we're sharing the very end where Tara is now doing really well and she's in a job that she loved, but it took time. It took years for her to get to that process. So just understanding that freedom is possible, that it's okay to hope, that it's okay to believe that there is another end. There's a light at the end of the tunnel for this. We at Rock Recovery believe that people can be really free from this disorder. It's not something you have to struggle with your entire life. It's not something that families will be affected by for their entire lives. And so it's just important. We like to throw this quote in there just so that people know that there's hope. There really is hope for freedom. All right, so resources for support. Where are a few places that you can get plugged into to get the support you need? So the first, Rock Recovery, we've got some great resources for you. We have a parents and loved ones prayer support group that meets monthly on the first Tuesday of the month. So in addition to the clinical services that we offer, Rock Recovery also offers faith-based support groups that are available nationwide. We have support groups for those who are struggling with eating disorders. And then we also have support groups and resources for parents and loved ones. And one of those is our monthly prayer group. In addition to that, we also have blogs, downloadable guides, videos, ebook resources, lots of different places that we can get you plugged into. So our contact information is going to be at the end of this presentation. If you have questions, if you need support, if you're looking for more resources, don't be afraid to reach out, and we are happy to help you find a place to get you connected to the support you need. And our next support group is going to be in May. It's going to be May. It's the first Tuesday, which I believe is the 4th. So yeah, we have the information on our website, and I can send it to Megan as a follow-up to share resources. But I believe that the first Tuesday is going to be May 4th. So that'll be our next group. There are also other organizations like the Alliance for Eating Disorders Awareness. They have a friends and family group that you can get plugged into. That's Wednesdays at 7 p.m. And then resources like the National Eating Disorders Association. They have a parent toolkit and a hotline where they're able to answer questions and have volunteers who can offer help for referrals and support and things like that. And then in addition to those groups, like I said, there are books, there are podcasts, there are so many resources out there. So here's just a few book recommendations we have, but again, there's a lot more out there. So Google is great for stuff like this. So we have a new resource that we just learned of recently is a book called Nearsighted by Karen K. Smith, and it centers around faith-based support for loved ones, and it's written from the perspective of someone who struggled with an eating disorder themselves, but it's written to families. So this is a really unique book, just in the way that she's shares her experience and tries to help loved ones understand why their loved one can't see that their eating disorder is hurting them. So that's one resource. Another one by a clinician that we also adore, Dr. Dana Herron. She wrote a book called Loving Someone with an Eating Disorder that's specifically geared towards spouses and partners. And then The Eating Disorder Trap is another great book that's geared towards clinicians and loved ones. So these are just a few things to help you kind of understand what's out there and what's available to offer you to offer support. And like I said, here's our contact information. If there's any way that we can help you, if there's support that we can get you connected to, we are happy to help. So that's our info email up there, or our phone number. We'd love to help you. We'd love to just get you connected to care. And we're so grateful for this opportunity to speak with you guys tonight and to just share a little bit more about eating disorders and about just how you can best care for your loved one.
Kristen and Christy, thank you so much. This was incredibly informative, and I think this is a topic that less people know about in the mental health field and know less about, and I think this was such an important conversation, and thank you so much for sharing. I am going to open it up to our audience to see if they have any questions. While they comment those in the chat, I did have somebody ask, are there any fees associated with the resources that you had listed? Do you know?
Yeah, that's a great question. So with the monthly parents and loved ones group that Rock Recovery offers, that is a free group. Like Christine mentioned at the beginning, we have clinical therapy groups for those who are struggling, and then the faith-based support groups as well. Those do have a fee associated with them, but one of the barriers that we really work to remove with eating disorder treatment is that cost piece. So we do offer sliding scale for everything, and we will work with families, we will work with individuals to make sure that they can get connected to the care they need at an affordable rate. With the books and those resources we share, there is a cost to them. The Alliance support group, I believe, is free, as are the NEDA resources that we shared. The toolkit is a downloadable guide, and then they have the hotline number. But, yeah.
Awesome. And while we wait to see if anybody has any questions, I actually have a couple that came to mind for me. One of the things that I know is a myth around eating disorders is that men can experience them. One thing I was wondering is, do eating disorders, some of those warning signs that you talked about, do they look different in men versus women? Do they typically look the same? I guess, are there gender differences?
Yeah. Christy, I might let you take that question.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we can't say it enough. People of all genders experience eating disorders, right? And unfortunately, I think there is less people who seek help often because of people like stigma and just misunderstandings. So as far as for men and gender differences, it really varies. So for a lot of people, for a lot of men, there are weight and shape concerns but they might present a little bit differently. It might be less about being thin. It might be more about being fit or being muscular. It kind of depends on the presentation and on the person, but there still can be a concern on physical appearance often. And then the social and emotional ones and things remain about the same. There's still the withdrawal, there's still sort of the isolation. And then as it relates, of course, to some physical symptoms that, back in the day, the DSM had loss of menstruation as one of the criteria for anorexia. And guys were like, hey, I never really had that to begin with. So we've come a long way and kind of getting some of those differences, I think, understood, but definitely some different things and a little sometimes easier for men to struggle. Some of the men that we have served, I feel like, just kind of thought like, oh, this is something that only happens to women, doesn't happen to men. And that's, of course, just not true and can keep more people from seeking care.
Thank you.
Good question.
Another question I was thinking about, I know a lot of families that come to NAMI already have some sort of diagnosis. How often are eating disorders comorbid with other diagnoses like depression, anxiety? And is this something that parents of a child with depression and anxiety should be looking for in addition?
Yeah, I can answer that one too, Kristen, if it's okay. So yes, I mean, there are a lot of comorbidities for people with eating disorders. And I'd say, I don't know the exact statistics, but just sort of generally speaking, I feel like the majority of our clients have depression and or anxiety in addition to an eating disorder. There's also, of course, substance use disorder and different presentations of that can co-occur. So there's a lot of co-occurring addiction and things as well. And we've heard a lot from people that, you know, they do better on their eating and suddenly they realize they're drinking more wine at night. And there's often sort of the seesaw approach we talk about a little bit with addiction transfer and different things that might happen as people seek recovery. So there are often comorbidities and co-occurring things, especially with substances. And then, yeah, I'll stop there for now. Good question.
I don't see any questions coming in yet. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We still have a couple more minutes to answer some questions. I have another one.
Right.
So I know you didn't address sort of the societal factors because I know that's a whole big topic, but I was curious if you could talk a little bit about, I guess, I know society has come a long way in the way that we talk about weight and the way that we talk about diet culture and body image, but I also know that we still have a long way to go. And I'm wondering if you talk a little bit about the impact on that society's view on weight and things like photoshopping in magazines and just heavy dependence on high diet culture, how that has impacted or you think might impact eating disorders.
Kristen, want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, we are starting to talk more about it. We are starting to talk more about the things that we're seeing that are diet culture and that are problematic, and often can give people this idea or reinforce this idea that there's a certain way that certain body types have to look, and following the BMI chart and what's normal. Like I have to be, a normal weight, but there's still so much work to be done. And we see it as, you hear a lot of the buzzwords like intuitive eating, and we love intuitive eating at Rock Recovery. We love, which intuitive eating is this idea that there was a book written by Elise Reich and oh my gosh, Christy, I'm blanking on the other author.
We'll do this together. Ellen Tribble, I think.
Evelyn Tribole, yeah.
Ellen Tribole, yeah, thank you.
And they offered 10 intuitive eating principles that help people to understand how to have a healthy relationship between food and your body. And the idea is eating to meet your body's unique needs. And so not having rules around food and not saying I can only eat this many calories a day, or I can only eat, I had a cupcake for lunch, so I can't have the cupcake for dinner, or this idea of needing to compensate. I had a big lunch, so I need to eat a small dinner, but really understanding what your body needs and finding patterns of eating that bring joy to your body and help you to function best, again, mentally, physically, emotionally. It takes all of that into account. And yet we've started to see intuitive eating kind of come into this space where people will use it as a way to, like, you see diet culture start to sneak in, and you see those things start to sneak in, where we have to step in and be like, okay, no, this is not intuitive eating. Like the intermittent fasting, that's not intuitive eating. That's not an intuitive eating principle. And so, we're seeing some great work being done, but at the same time, there's still you still see a lot of the diet culture stuff, a lot of commercials, the new, oh, it's not a diet. It is. Anything where you're restricting and telling your body, setting rules around food, it's a diet. So I don't know if that answers your question, but or Christy, if you have anything to add to that. But yeah, I think the bulk of it is we need to continue having these conversations. We need to be talking about those stereotypes, like you said, around like men not being able to have eating disorders and things like that. But the work is starting to be done.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is that, there are unrealistic standards placed on all of us. And I feel like it starts at a very young age. There's all kinds of stats about magazines and people, women in particular, I think, who read magazines are more depressed afterwards and feel worse about themselves. And I think that targeting goes to people of all genders as well now, right? I don't think, unfortunately, anyone's free from the targeting of different ads to kind of make them feel like their body isn't good enough or that it needs to be changed. So diet culture is certainly really rampant. Social media use, comparison. I mean, all the comparison things can happen. And that can happen really young. And there is a lot of just the portrayal of a fake life or filters or different things. So you're comparing yourself against a fake person, or it's not even a fair rubric, right? Or fair assessment. And so that can cause a lot of harm, I think, for people as well. And I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but there is a lot of research that shows that, again, I mentioned earlier, that dieting is really sort of a gateway into eating disorders. And I mean, I think the stat is something like half of girls by age 10 have been on a diet, like by age 10, over half of them have been on diets. And a lot of women, actually, a lot of girls, so I think 10 to 13 is the other statistic that says that they're more likely to engage in crash dieting behaviors and really risky behaviors around food and weight, and already are pursuing weight loss before they've even gone through puberty, right? Like their bodies should gain weight, there should be changes. So there's just a lot of harmful things that happen with diet culture early on and a lot of pressures, and that just kind of snowballs and often can really harm people along the way.
Thank you. I know we could have an entire other conversation just about that topic and could probably go on for hours. I just, had to ask because I know it's a very big conversation happening right now, and a lot of celebrities are taking on some of that as well. So, but I don't see any other questions that came in. Looks like you just provided great information that nobody needed to ask anything else. So thank you both so much for coming, for presenting. This is fantastic information. Thank you to everyone who joined us live. Feel free to share the link. It will be recorded, so people can view the presentation at any time. And I know Kristen and Christy are going to send me some of the resources, and we'll send that out in our next newsletter so that you can access those. But thank you again for everyone who came, and we hope that you are able to join us for some of our Mental Health Month events coming up soon. But have a great night. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.